this countdown we have the Cabbage Patch dolls. Those creepy little baby powder smelling dolls have a bunch of urban legends of their own, but one that really scared children in the 90s was this one. So legend goes that Cabbage Patch dolls were designed to resemble what people would look like after a nuclear attack. According to this legend, back in the late 80s, President Reagan and the Cabbage Patch Dolls company decided to make the dolls intentionally odd looking. They did this because scientists believed that the dolls were what the offspring of survivors of a nuclear war would look like. These dolls were then a way for people to get accustomed to this look so that people weren't ostracized for their appearance. That's terrifying. I can never look at those dolls the same way again. Moving on to number 9, we have the Kisses. Who here remembers Kisses? Not the chocolate and not the, like the brightly colored beads. They were pretty popular in the late 80s to early 90s, especially in the Philippines. Now, in the Philippines, there was a legend that you could make these beads reproduce. Creepy, I know. Legend goes that if you put the beads in cotton and soak them in alcohol or water, then they would multiply and give birth to more kisses. In our 8th spot, we have the bridges. Here is another pretty popular urban legend from the Philippines. Legend states that bridges were made stronger if they use dead bodies in the construction. As a result, a lot of people believe that bodies were being cemented into the foundation of bridges. The legend continues by saying that bridge builders were collecting dead bodies for these bridges. Then throughout the 90s, there were a lot of disappearances, which fueled this urban legend even more. Making our way down the list at number 7, we have Homie the Clown. Clowns are creepy enough on their own, so why do people have to go out and create terrifying urban legends about them? Well, in Chicago in the 90s, there was a legend going around of a creepy man stalking people trying to kidnap them. This man was dressed up as Homie the Clown from the TV show In Living Color. Some say he will try to lure you into his van with candy, while others believe that he was a serial killer or a maniac on the loose. A lot of people believe this legend to be true. However, there was no hard evidence proving it. Just a lot of supposed sightings. Moving on to number 6, we have the mind control. Disneyland is a magical place. You got fun rides, amazing sights, and cute mascot characters. But what if I told you that Disneyland was mind controlling its guests? That was a legend that was being spread all throughout the 90s into the 2000s. So apparently Disneyland is pumping out a certain fume throughout the park that makes you feel super happy. This scent basically triggers the release of endorphins in your brain, which is what makes everyone love Disney and keeps them coming back. Now, this is somewhat true. Disneyland has a device known as the Smeltzer, which can control what you smell. This device that is disguised by looking like a speaker is a scent generator that makes sure you smell exactly what they want you to smell. In the main entrance, it's said that you will smell popcorn. At the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it will smell like wet wood and sea salt. And in candy shops or ice cream parlors, you will smell vanilla. Very sneaky, Disney. Very sneaky. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the sacrifice. Here is another popular urban legend from the Philippines. In the 90s, it was well believed that if you left your slippers outside of your house at night, then a cult member would kill you. Sounds ridiculous, but this legend made kids paranoid. Now, there are a bunch of different versions of this legend, but the general idea is that if you leave your flip-flops, sandals, shoes, or any footwear outside your door, a cult member will kill you. Apparently, those members do some weird chant over the footwear, like a spell, which will make the owner open the door to their house and let them in. When inside, you will suffer a very unfortunate fate. Other versions say that they will behead the owner and then bring the head with them. Whereas some believe that these individuals are Satanists and they do this as a sacrifice for the devil. Either way, this is a pretty creepy legend. Coming in at number 4, we have the 100 Steps Cemetery. The 100 Steps Cemetery is located in Indiana and is said to be very deadly. Now, no one really knows when or how this legend began, but it became pretty popular in the 90s. So legend goes that if you are in this cemetery at midnight, then you must climb the steps and count to 100. When you reach the top, you will be greeted by the ghost of an undertaker. This ghost will give you the vision of your death. On the way back down, you're supposed to count the steps again. If you count the same number of steps on the way down, then the vision is real and that's how you're gonna die. Whereas if you count a different number on the way down, then the vision is false. People that try to outsmart the cemetery by, let's say, climbing to the top of the hill without using the stairs will be severely punished. There are reports of people being knocked out or shoved by an unseen force. Some people have even had a large red handprint remain on their back for days. That is said to be the mark of the devil. Moving on at number 3, we have tap tap tap. This is a pretty popular urban legend that probably dates back before the 90s, but was very popular throughout the 90s. So according to this legend, a couple head out to the woods in their car to have a little fun time. However, while in the woods, their car won't start. So the boyfriend leaves to go look for some help. The girl remains in the car with the doors locked, waiting for her boyfriend to return. After hours, she begins to worry. She's alone in the dark in the car and she keeps hearing this tapping noise. For hours, something was going tap 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 on her roof. Eventually, she falls asleep and in the morning, she is greeted by the sheriff. He escorts her out of the car and that's when she sees her boyfriend hanging from a tree over the car, dead. The tapping noise she heard all night? That was the sound of his feet hitting the roof of the car below. Okay, that one is pretty terrifying. In our second spot, we have the black-eyed children. This legend is definitely one to keep you up at night. I've talked about it on this channel before, but for those of you who don't know, this legend is about evil children whose eyes are completely black. The kids can be anywhere from 6 to 16 years old and target adults who are alone, but they aren't actually children. Although they look like them, they are said to be some sort of creature that takes form as a child. These kids often ask for favors, such as asking to get a ride home with them, asking for food, or to use the bathroom in their house. But it's said that once you let them in, they will commit acts of extreme violence. Now, there are too many stories about people encountering these children. 1998 was said to be the first encounter. A man claims that 2 black-eyed children tried to get a drive home from him. That report is what caused the legend of the black-eyed children to become popular in the late 90s. And in our number 1 spot, we have the chupacabra. The chupacabra is a legend about a creature that likes to attack animals and consume their blood. Chupacabras were first reported in 1995 in Puerto Rico, where they were blamed for attacks on goats, sheep, and other domestic animals. These animals were found uneaten, but just drained of blood, as if they were attacked by a vampire. The monster is said to be able to stand upright and resembles a large reptilian kangaroo with huge red eyes. Other people have said that the monster looks like a canine in appearance, but is hairless. Now, there are also sightings of the chupacabra around the southwest as well, but people all over the world have now said that they have also found their livestock dead, with 2 puncture wounds and being drained of blood. So, watch out, because this creature may actually be real. Starting off this countdown, we have the blue star. In the early 90s, a hoax was being spread around by concerned parents. The legend was that drug dealers were giving kids temporary tattoos that were laced with LSD. Apparently, these tattoos would come in shapes of blue stars or popular characters like Mickey Mouse. In fact, this legend was so popular that in some schools, temporary tattoos were banned. Moving on at number 9, we have the Halloween candy. Man, I used to love Halloween. Yeah, actually, no, I still love Halloween. I miss trick-or-treating. Those days were the best, like going door to door and getting a bag full of free candy. What else could we ask for? But in the 90s, parents were very concerned about the candy their kids were receiving. Legend goes that people were sticking razor blades inside of candy apples, needles were being pushed inside of candy bars, and people were even injecting poison into the candy. The legend continues with it always being about a sick man that wanted to kill for fun. As a result, it was advised for parents to always check their child's candy before they eat it. Even nowadays, this legend is super popular. Every Halloween, it is still advised to thoroughly check your child's candy before letting them indulge. Coming in at number 8, we have I Am Cold. This legend surrounds a teen who one day stumbled upon some robbers stashing gold in the pipes of their home. The boy was so scared that he ran away and hid in a woodshed on a farm. Later on, he was found curled up, frozen to death. His ghost then terrorized the property, saying, "I'm cold," in an eerie voice. He haunts the ground looking for a jacket to keep him warm. Apparently, if you do give him a jacket, then he will transform to a normal, healthy looking boy and then vanish. If not, he will continue to haunt you. Coming in at number 7, we have the footprints. So it was a very snowy night and a young girl was staying up late watching her favorite TV show. As it got later, she noticed a man outside of her window. The man was very scary looking and he was holding a big knife. Terrified of the man, she hid underneath the covers and called the cops. The cops came by and inspected the area, however, found no footprints in the snow outside of the window that the girl saw this man. But what they did find was a trail of wet footprints inside her house, leading up to the couch where the girl was sitting. Therefore, the man was standing right behind her the whole time and she just saw his reflection. In our 6th spot, we have killer claws. Happy holidays, everyone! Although it's the middle of the summer here in Canada, let's pretend that it's December and, around Christmas time for this next legend. So this legend surrounds a woman who, on Christmas Eve, killed her husband. While disposing of his body down a well, an emergency warning was released telling everyone to stay inside because a patient escaped from an asylum and is on the loose, killing people while dressed up as Santa. The killer ends up coming to this woman's home and tries to kill her with an axe. The woman tries to outsmart him and the police by basically saying that the killer Santa was the one that killed her husband and she was innocent. But her plan fell through when her daughter ended up letting the killer inside the house. She ends up saying, "Look, Mom, Santa is here." Then sadly, the woman gets axed to death. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Locked In. This next legend surrounds a girl that couldn't speak. As a result, she was constantly bullied by her classmates. One day, her mom found out that her husband, who was overseas, was sick. As a result, she sent her daughter to her grandmother's house while she went to go look after her husband. However, while on her way to her grandmother's house, her classmates started picking on her and chased her all the way back to her house. They then locked her inside of her room, and she ended up dying of starvation. She is now said to haunt the grounds as a ghost. Making our way down the list at number 4, we have the corrupt executioner. So this next legend surrounds an executioner that loved killing criminals. Whenever someone was sentenced to the death penalty, he would be happy that he was the one pulling the lever of the electric chair. However, one day the government ruled that the death penalty was unethical. So the man was out of work and many criminals got to continue living. But he didn't like this, so he went around killing off these criminals. Eventually, the corrupt executioner was caught just when the death penalty was reinstated. So it was a pretty shocking end to this legend, if you catch my drift. In our 3rd spot, we have the vain woman. Once there was a young, beautiful woman. All she cared about was her beauty and getting rich. As a result, she would often steal other people's jewelry and then pawn it off to get the money. While at the pawn shop one day, the owner offered her an undeniably great deal. He said that he would give her $10,000 if she would just let him take a mold of her face, since she was just so beautiful. So she agreed, thinking that this dude was just some weirdo with a fetish, and so she took the money and went on to live a very luxurious life. Now, the man did say that she would have 4 months to reverse the deal. Well, the day after the 4 months were done, the girl started to become less beautiful. By the hours, her skin grew wrinklier and wrinklier. She was aging rapidly. Turns out that the man ended up stealing her beauty and gave it to his dead wife to revive her. He does this every so often to keep his wife alive. Not a very profitable deal if you ask me. In our 2nd spot, we have drip, drip, drip. Alright, for this legend, it surrounds a teen who was afraid of the dark. But she had a cute little dog that would sleep under her bed and keep her company. First off, if you have a dog, when you want it on your bed to cuddle with, not underneath your bed, come on. Whenever she would feel afraid in the middle of the night, she would just put her hand under the bed and her dog would lick it and that would reassure her. But one night she heard something go drip, drip, drip. Being scared, she put her hand under the bed and felt reassured when she felt her dog licking her hand. However, the dripping didn't stop, so she got up and checked the bathroom. She checked the taps, nothing. But she still heard drip, drip, drip. She checked under the sink, but there was nothing. She still heard that dripping noise. Lastly, she checked the shower, and behind the curtain she found her dog dead in the shower, his blood dripping down from the shower head. There was then a message written in blood saying, "People lick too." Honestly, this is probably the main reason that when I go to the bathroom, I rip open the shower curtain to make sure no one's there. Like, man, this legend made me paranoid. And in our number 1 spot, we have Lights Out. So this next urban legend is a bit different than the rest. This legend was actually spread via a fax machine in the 1990s to the early 2000s. This legend started off as a fake warning from police. Then it kept being faxed around and stayed in circulation for years. So this is the legend about the flashing headlights. Basically, legend goes that part of a gang's initiation process involves one of the members driving around with their headlights off. Then they would kill the first person who flashes their headlights at them. So people were warning others to never flash their headlights at cars driving without them on. And that's all for today's video. Let's move on to our comment shout out portion. I'll be shouting out comments from my video, Top 10 Scary Caillou Urban Legends. Fabian Asensio commented, I hope Lindsay is alright. She looks like she's been crying. She is one of my favorite people on Most Amazing Top 10. I don't know why people keep commenting this. Like on almost every single one of my videos, it's, Lindsay, are you okay? You look like you were crying before you started this video. I'm fine. I think it's the lights, like the way I have them positioned, it like just makes my eyes watery. But honestly, I appreciate you guys checking in on me and like making sure I'm all right. I promise I am 100% all right. Thank you so much. But I am not crying in my videos. I don't know why. Kayla Ray Colgan commented, oh yes, that little Canadian bald brat. Wow. You guys are such Caillou haters. Madison Lee commented, my sister is pregnant and I'm thinking of threatening to show my nephew Caillou. No, don't do that. Oh, you're so mean. Don't do that. Don't torture your poor little nephew. And that's all the comments I'm showing out for today's video. Make sure to comment something down below for a chance to be featured in my next comment shout out. And as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan, and I'll see you when I see you. Therefore, the man was standing right behind her the whole time, and she just saw his reflection. Got a bite on the back of my arm, like a spider bit me while I was doing this. So help me, if you guys play it back and see a spider on my arm,
Starting us off at number 10 is The Patient. Now, I hate any mental institution story because I know for a fact in the 80s and 90s, horrible things happened in those places and those people were treated like animals. This story was shared by an anonymous person who said their grandma used to work at one of these facilities. But this one was where prisoners were sent who were too mentally unstable to be in actual prison. Now, one of the patients was put there because he had killed his parents and hid their bodies under the floorboards of his house. Every other day, he would bring his mother's body out and do explicit things to it. Necrophiliac, let's just leave it at that. He was caught after his neighbors started complaining about the stench, which was obviously the rotting bodies. Either way, this patient was super fond of the grandma and she happened to live walking distance from the facility. Either way, some patients who were well enough were allowed to walk around the area, and one day she woke up in the middle of the night to intense banging at her door. The patient had escaped and begged her to come inside. Safe to say, he was caught ASAP and the grandma moved house ASAP as well. Coming in at number 9 is Chad Mora. Back in May of 1990, 19-year-old Chad was on his way back to work after picking up some sandwiches from his house. An hour later, his parents ended up going to his hardware store to get some things, but Chad's car was nowhere to be found. The other employees hadn't seen him either, and he never ended up coming home that night. 2 days later, his parents reported him missing, and 3 days after that, his body was found 150 miles away. He had died from carbon monoxide poisoning in his car in a new unlocked garage. Now, the police initially thought it was a suicide, but when his body was examined, his parents could see bruises on his face and body, and his knuckles had been skinned. He had clearly fought with someone. The shirt he was wearing had blood on it, and after looking at the crime scene photos, his parents noticed a jacket on the passenger seat that they knew did not belong to him. When the county sheriff asked for the jacket, Chicago PD told them it had gone missing. Autopsy results also showed the level level of carbon monoxide in his body was 74%. Now, if he had died because of it, the level should have been around 50 to 60%, meaning he was already unconscious when he started inhaling it. Hence, someone had killed or thoroughly beat him before planting him at the scene. 3 people ended up getting arrested for his death on the basis of moving from Chicago to Madison very close to the time of his death. Nothing was ever proven though, so we don't know who killed Chad Mora. At number 8, we have the string of homicides. 58-year-old Clark Perry Baldwin was the perpetrator behind a string of countless murders in the early 1990s. In 1991, he was arrested for raping a hitchhiker he had picked up. He had even tried choking her to death too, but she had managed to escape. That same year, he killed Pamela Rose McCall and her unborn child, and in 1992, he was charged with killing 2 women known as Bitter Creek Betty and I-90 Jane Doe. Betty was found frozen naked and left with just her wedding ring, whereas I-90 Jane Doe had been strangled and hit in the head with something, and her body was found mummified. Brutal. Thankfully, DNA recovered from the McCall case got a match last year and was matched with the suspect of 2 other unsolved homicides. It ended up matching Baldwin, and the sick bastard was finally arrested. Yes! Justice! We love a bit of justice. Following our number 7 slot is the kidnapping. This one was shared by a now deleted Reddit user who used to work at a pretty famous record shop in LA in the 90s. There was one customer in his 20s that used to come in quite regularly and spoke to the user quite a bit. Now, one day while talking, he mentioned how her dad wasn't American, a detail she had never told him herself. Concerned but not too concerned, she just assumed one of her co-workers had told him. The next week, as she was driving home from work, her car ended up breaking down. It was miles to the nearest payphone, but she managed to get there and call a cab. She sat in front of the payphone and waited for a few minutes before it randomly started ringing. Doubtful, she answered it to some guy saying, "Bad luck about your car, talk to me until your ride gets there." Now, she hung up automatically when she realized the voice on the phone belonged to that same customer. He had followed her and trailed her car and called her from somewhere nearby. Within 48 hours, she had quit her job and moved back home with her parents, and found out months later that same customer was arrested for kidnapping. She was this close to becoming his kidnappee. Now at number 6 is Isaac Gerwig. On the 2nd of April 1995, 18-year-old Isaac Gerwig was found dead in the water of this canal in Nieuwegein, Netherlands. Autopsy results showed he had been hit in the head with a blunt object and died of those injuries before being thrown in the water days later. But the Wednesday before his death, Isaac spent time at home celebrating his sister's birthday before walking over to his girlfriend's house. But that was a trip he never came back from. Now, to give some background, the boy was unemployed, but he was a sound guy. He didn't do drugs, he didn't drink, he wanted to join the army, and his girlfriend claimed they were about to get engaged. Upon further investigation, the team then started guessing he'd been mistaken for someone else and then killed because of it. The case gave up no clues, no leads, and most importantly, no suspects. Coming in at number 5 is the baby. Back in May of 1990, 2-month-old Harpreet Paul was left in the backseat of parents' car near the Coquitlam Centre Mall. The parents left it unlocked, and when they came back 30 minutes later, the baby and car seat had vanished. Now, before going further into the case, why on earth would the parents leave the baby in the car and leave the car unlocked? Is that literally not in the what not to do as a parent manual? Isn't that on the first page, people? The case got barely any press, and the parents also moved city. The kid could very much still be alive, and the police theorized maybe a barren woman could have seen the crying baby and taken her thinking she was saving her. Another version of the story involves a witness claiming they saw a man carrying a crying baby onto the bus around the time of the disappearance. My dear Harpreet Paul, wherever did you end up? At number 4 is Ronald Lee Stoker. In May of 1996, 15-year-old Jean Marie Humble ran away from Peoria's Children's Home Academy, which was a place for troubled kids. As she was walking with no plan, she was offered a ride from Ronald and accepted. And yes, he was a stranger, but she was also extremely desperate to get away. He drove miles into the country to this abandoned farm shed and brought her inside. There, he raped her with a knife, beat her, choked her, and slashed her across the throat and left her for dead. but she wasn't. Superwoman Jean managed to walk a mile to the nearest house to ask for help. Ronald and his car were nowhere to be found by the time authorities ended up getting to Jean. She ended up dying from her injuries a month later, and Ronald was found a year later in Costa Rica, where he had fled. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder and 30 years on top of that for the sexual assault. And honestly, he probably deserved more than that, I'm not gonna lie to you. Filling our number 3 star is Edward Fonda III. Now, Edward was a retired machinist that moved to Springfield Township in Pennsylvania. He was living with his daughter Mary Jane and spent most of his time fixing up the house and creating a lovely garden. In 1993, his wife died, and he, at that point quite old, needed a cane to get around. According to Mary Jane, his wife's death killed Edward on the inside, but other accounts claim that Edward and Mary Jane weren't even close, so how would she even know that? In August of that year, Mary woke up one morning and claimed she had heard her dad go to the front door. She fell back asleep for a few hours and woke up to find him still not home. She reported him missing, and it was assumed he had wandered off somewhere, but that was unlikely. Then his kids changed their story and claimed he had committed suicide, also unlikely. Then authorities started suspecting it was Mary Jane who killed her father for unknown reasons. She had no alibi for the hours she said she was asleep, and then her story started changing. Mary then claimed she was on a lot of medication at the time and could have done something she doesn't remember. An X was also weirdly marked on her calendar for that day at 8 a.m. Was it premeditated? No one has been able to figure it out, and no one will. Now, number 2 is Cartierville John Doe. On the 1st of March 1991, a body was found in the Cartierville suburb of Montreal. The man was around 30 to 50 years old and was found in a box wrapped in garbage bags. The box was disposed of in the city dump, but it was a trail of blood that led someone to find the box. It had been snowing quite a bit, but the box wasn't that covered, meaning it hadn't been there for that long. When authorities finally examined the body, they were horrified. The man had been stabbed to death 127 times all over his body, and I mean all over. His face, his genitals, his eyeballs, everywhere. His hands had also been cut off, and the extent of his wounds made him virtually impossible to identify. Investigators believe it was a crime of passion, but there's just no way. I refuse to believe that. I get hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but come on, what could this guy have done to his partner for them to go and do that? Really? And finally, at number 1 is Leah Ulbridge, October 29th, 1995. 24-year-old Leah Ulbridge was dragged to death by a speeding car for 4 painful miles. The route went from the South Meadows of Hartford to Goodwin Park in Wethersfield. Officials believe it's still the largest crime scene ever recorded, and I can't even think of the gore that was left along the route. Officers said they found a trail of thick blood as well as pieces of her body and clothing. Apparently, a witness saw her in an argument with someone in a Nissan Altima that morning at 5 a.m. What happened next is very convoluted. Either she tried to get out of the car herself, or she was pushed out with her arms still trapped in the seatbelt. A newspaper delivery driver saw the car with Leah struggling attached to it and tried following it, but it sped away from him. She was so torn apart by the end of it that officers identified her solely by her tattoos. Leah had lived a very troubled life until then. She had been married with 2 kids who had been taken off her due to her drug problem. The route where she had an argument was also known to be an area populated with sex workers. And in the 90s and even now, sex workers usually go missing or are killed and no one is looking for them. It is a huge problem.